its old mode, pro-American mode, then you've got to kick them out for us. We can't do it. So get BlackRock down here to seal the deal on the entry and exit ports, and send in a big warship so the Chinese understand you're serious and we'll be your partner. And he's saying that's what the Europeans are saying. German, if you look at German jobs and manufacturing, they've gone down about 20% because of China. And everybody says, well, it's just paranoid about China. No, it's the whole world, because when you look at their $4 or $5 trillion investment, creating products for which they don't really have a domestic market for. It's all predicated on dumping it cheaper than domestic production in Europe, in Japan, in Korea. And what Trump is now trying to do is say, if we all stick together, we're about 70% of the trade, not them. We're much bigger than they are. And as far as we are, we only have 11%. Gave the damage, just like he did with O. He said, you know what, someday they're going to invade you guys, or can't trust the Russians. They laughed at him. He literally laughed at him at that meeting when he said, don't trust the Russians on natural gas. And then they didn't listen to him. And then finally he said, am I getting out? Hey,
comes to video creation, every detail matters. I go to artlist.io for music that matches my vision. The more options I have, the bigger my story becomes. With advanced filter options, I can find what I need in a snap. Each track is by artists as passionate as I am. High-end sound effects add a whole new dimension to make my videos perfect. And I get all this.
I might do this. And then when he left office, 20, almost, I think it was 18 out of the 32 had agreed, and now it's all but 8 or 9. Same are the deal. So when they'll cut a deal, and then he's going to try to redirect all this to China. And China's not acting very rational. I mean, their Secretary of State put up a film of Mao Zedong, Korean War vintage, when he was, they had sent Chinese troops across the Yalu River that overran the Americans in November, December of 1950. And then Eisenhower, was thinking of running. Truman was president. And then I came in early 53, and within 6 months they had a ceasefire. But in that process of negotiating that ceasefire, we don't listen to Eisenhower. We do what we're Chinese. They thought that was going to gain them worldwide respect. In other words, they're saying we're going to put on a mass murder, kill more people than anybody in the world, including Hitler and Stalin combined. And he's going to threaten everybody on this tape, and you're all going to think that's great. And no, you're going to be afraid of it. No, everybody's going to despise you for doing that. As I said last time, I just want to know what China's cards are. What are their cards that they're playing? And this is what the big winner on this is Scott Bessant. Yeah, about China, furthermore, is everybody there, 6% GDP, and they look at taking over the Belt and Road, but they're very vulnerable. It's all predicated on nobody's going to react to them in concert. attitude is, if Japan, if South Korea, if Australia, if the UK, if the United States tries to push back, then we'll go to the other countries and help turn them against them. And if everybody sticks together, and Trump is trying to be amicable with our trade partners that haven't really stuck together with us because they've had asymmetrical tariffs, but they've got 300,000 students here. They want every one of them. Every single weapon system, whether an airplane or a tank or a rocket or a missile, is copied from us. And where did that technology come from? It came from either forcing companies that are doing business in China to turn over their expertise or stealing it under the guise of green card holders and students. Everybody knows that. So I'd ask our audience this, just imagine something right now. When this is all over and we have a same tariff that China does, we put one on them, what they do, and that will cut their surplus probably 150, 200 billion. And we just tell them, you know what? We don't really need your students anymore. We've got all kinds of students that want to come here. We got students from Europe, they're underrepresented. We got people from India, we got people from Japan. Why don't we have 100,000 Japanese students? Why don't we have 50,000 Germans? You know what I mean? We don't need your students. All they do is pay extra premiums. They're here as a force of the universities to make money, a force multiplier. So we don't need them. And we don't want you to buy any more farmland. And you know what? I don't know where you're going to get your technology, but you're not going to get it from us anymore. Go get it from Vietnam. That would be a much more stable world. So that's what he's aiming at. And he's going to wake up one morning and say, you know what? We're trapped, because if we go into Taiwan, everybody's going to put trade junctions on us. And right now they're planning to decouple. So the United States and Europe suddenly got wise to us, and they're going to start building their own pharmaceutical protective equipment for epidemics. They're going to get their own parts. They're not going to need us anymore. And if they don't need us anymore, then we're going to be in big trouble.
If you enjoyed today's video on Inner Vision, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share your thought in the comments below.
Jane struggled for years with dental issues before finally finding Nuvia. Listen to what he wanted most after his smile makeover.
I want to be able to smile at my wife. I'm confident.
Good morning.
And if they steal 2028, for some reason we don't prevail, which would be them stealing it, they're going to put Trump back on trial for prison. They're going to put me back in prison. Every day I said, hey, this... they're all partying. Oh, this is great, and everybody's running around. I got a MAGA hat now, and I said, hey, that's fine, but understand we're at war.
Will Trump's Tariff Liberation Day harm the US economy? Is Elon Musk leaving the administration? And is the president deporting enough illegal immigrants? My name is Stephen Edgington, and I'm GB News' US correspondent. Joining me to answer those questions and many more is the former White House chief strategist, Stephen K. Bannon. Thank you so much, Steve, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We just had Liberation Day, but many Americans are concerned that prices are going to go up and
Americans,
tariffs...
okay, stop. This is just the only reason people have any concern at all is because the running dog for the capitalists on Wall Street and the lords of easy money media continues to go on with this false narrative that prices are going to go up, stock market's going to crash, everything's going to happen over and over and over again without looking at any evidence. We put some of the strictest tariffs ever on China in 17 and 18, and prices didn't go up at all on Chinese product. This is just another false narrative put out by the media. It's the same as all the lies they told about the pandemic, all the lies they told about the Ukraine, all the lies they told about this whole election. I could go on and on and on. The only people worked up about, did the market crash today? No, did not. You have a sorting out of things. I didn't say there was not going to be any turbulence. Didn't have any crash, didn't have gold blow through the roof. Nothing that was prophesized yesterday. And look, Trump went hard. And it shows you, I think, to the world, he's not a maximalist. I was always for the reciprocity. But the reciprocity has a maximalist side where you just go and match whatever your analysis shows. He was also thinking there was tension around with President Trump to just do tiered at 20%. He did do reciprocity, which I thought was very important to show the American people how people have abused the United States of America and American companies. And just this narrative that's out there by the vested interests in this country who don't want to see the end of the globalist system. The globalists are sitting here in panic mode because now Trump has gone large and he's not going to back off. If you noticed today, I thought it was very important, there was a lot of commentary out there, including his Secretary of Commerce and even me saying, hey, Trump will be negotiating between now and the end of the current term. Before his third term, and he put out the word no negotiations. They are what they are. So I think you show he has. stepped into this decision. This is core Trump. This is something he's been thinking about for 40 years, but really thinking deeply about with his advisors since the election was stolen, went to Mar-a-Lago. And I think this narrative just on and on and on, particularly by people on the left who want to be populist or understand that the reason that they lost is that they abandoned, the Democrats abandoned the working class in this country and they won't support or vote for them anymore. You would think that they would try to at least understand the populist economic nationalist policy in bringing a massive amount of capital investment in plant equipment here, bringing plants and bringing high value jobs back.
That's the key point, isn't it? And isn't it more honest to say, look, we know that this is going to have an impact on prices if you put at least a 10%, in some cases much higher.
There's going to
be an impact on the price.
It doesn't mean the increased costs flow to the consumer. Let me repeat this. You can add everybody combined, and we don't buy as much as we buy from China. I think it's the net trade deficit with China is $500 or $600 million, $1 billion. We are essentially to the Chinese what the colonies of America used to be to Great Britain during the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. We're just shipping raw materials. We send very little finished product because they gutted all our factories and sent them to China. So in buying that $500 billion and $600 billion is actually more because that's the net deficit. In buying that amount of finished product from China, prices didn't go up in 18 and 19. They just didn't. In Christmas of 19, we had virtually no inflation, lowest interest rates we've ever had, exploding growth, 3.5% growth. We had blue-collar wages rising faster than white-collar. We had non-college graduates raising higher than college graduates. That's kind of the economic nationalist model of Trump, and we're restricting immigration at the time. Since that time, Biden's exploded, invited in 10 million illegal alien invaders to drive down wage costs among unskilled workers. But there's no evidence when Trump did this the first time, not a scintilla evidence from the largest partner we buy from on finished goods that there was any price increase. There was no price increase we could see when we put the steel tariffs in. So they try to use this to scare people. The two reasons for tariffs is, number one, I think for people in Great Britain to understand, is that this is a premium market. The United States is a premium market. So what President Trump, he thinks about, he says, hey, it's like buying a skybox at a sporting event or front row tickets to a concert. To get into this market, you're going to have to pay a premium, okay, to get access to the biggest consumer, the deepest consumer market in the world. There's two ways to do that. You either stay outside and manufacture finished products, and you're going to pay a tolling fee to get in here. I think the reciprocal tariffs are in Great Britain, I think it was 10%, if memory serves me correctly. Or you have an option. You have an option to come and move your manufacturing to the United States. I think he'd rather have the manufacturing come to the United States. But if not, we have an external revenue service now that Peter Navarro says in the auto loans alone, the auto tariffs alone will bring in $100 billion. Remember, just think about this for a second. We sell essentially $800 billion of cars in the United States a year. Okay, of that, only 500 billion of that are made overseas, Germany, Japan, etc. Even of the 350 or 300 billion that are manufactured here, they're really not manufactured; they're assembled. We take still the high value added finished goods, the drive train, the engine from either Mexico, Germany, or in Mexico, we're making it for the Germans. So, or the Japanese. That all has to stop. We have to bring, and this is about bringing high value added manufacturing jobs to the United States, and certainly it's going to cause a little turbulence. I mean, we essentially, I think, went to economic war with the Chinese Communist Party yesterday. Those are particularly where Xi is on his economic revival, which they're in very bad straits. These tariffs, I think, could put Xi out of business. So it's both the geoeconomic and resetting the post-war international rules-based order, but it's also geostrategic.
Lots of companies tried to outsource their manufacturing away from China and into other Southeast Asian countries like Vietnam.
Cambodia.
Right.
Cambodia had a bad.
So
Cambodia had a bad day yesterday.
Exactly. So is putting 50% tariffs on countries like Vietnam strategically a smart thing to do when you're trying to decouple from China, when you're trying to encourage people to stop building in China?
Well, decoupling with China, we want to bring those jobs back to the United States. Yes, there's still going to be product made in Cambodia and these other places. But why? It's just reciprocal. Remember, President Trump's adamant. If you bring the tariffs down, and particularly on reciprocity, you bring the non-tariff barriers, which is really where the juice is. You bring that down, we'll let bygones be bygones.
Right, but it's not reciprocal, though, because the data that they're relying on is the trade deficit. They're not actually talking about specific tariffs those countries have implemented or non-tariff barriers. They've made that calculation, and the White House have said this, they've admitted this, based on the trade deficit in goods with the United States. So how is that reciprocal?
What's reciprocal to that country? You've got to work with us to decrease
the deficit, but not to the.
But you have to do what you have to do to work and make sure that we somehow take care of that deficit. The accumulate, because everybody talks about our debt here, the $37 trillion in debt. We're going to have, I think, the Biden, last year is going to be, I think, near $1 trillion trade deficit. We have a cumulative trade deficit, I believe, of $25 trillion. They're kind of inextricably linked with debt, but the globalists never want to talk about trade deficit. They say, it doesn't really matter. It matters tremendously. That was the wages of United States workers going overseas to pay something, or it's the monetization of certain assets we have to pay for it. So no, I think each country in its own way will work out some sort of individual deal. President Trump said he's open. Right now he says no negotiations because I think he wants a time for them to kind of realize that he's serious about this, and he is serious about this. His primary focus is the economic rejuvenation of the United States, and I think that's very powerful. And for the American people, it's been an eye-opener. Because remember, one of the reasons we're $37 trillion in debt is we have $1 trillion defense bill. Why do we have $1 trillion defense bill? Well, we're underwriting the security of Western Europe, of the Persian Gulf and the Gulf Emirates, of around the South China Sea and the Straits of Malacca, and then up to Northwest Asia with Japan and Korea. That has to stop. We're upside down. We have trade deficits basically with every part of you go around the horn, around the rim of the Eurasian landmass, we have trade deficits everywhere. We can't continue. He's trying to bring down the financial deficit. At the same time, he's trying to bring down the trade deficit. And this is the first time in our history, even with Reagan, that any president has stepped up and said, my first priority is American workers. And I'm going to show you how it's going to happen because I'm basically going to lay out a new economic model for the world. And the world can think about it, adjust to it, and then come to us. I'm sure they'll have open discussions.
Right, you mentioned Ronald Reagan. I'm going to quote from Reagan. This is when he was president. He was massively against the tariffs that occurred in the early 1930s during the Great Depression. He said, you see at first when someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes that works for a short while. What eventually occurs is homegrown industries start relying on government protection in the form of high tariffs. They stop competing and making innovative management and technological changes they need to succeed in world markets. And then something even worse happens. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries. The result is more tariffs, higher and higher trade barriers, and less competition.
Okay, Thatcher, I don't need to be, okay, I got it. I understand what Reagan said. Reagan and Thatcher were neoliberal, neocons. Okay, at that time, they tried to take on the Soviet Union. I appreciate that, but we also remember Ronald Reagan was coming in at the beginning of which we had been a manufacturing superpower. And Carter started to, as soon as we started running trade deficits and we stopped protecting American industries from mercantilist systems, that right there is a fantasy. It's a fantasy that comes out of the kind of the National Review and all the intellectual conservatives like the Tory Party that have gotten us into this situation, that gutted England, that gutted the United States because they believed in the system of fair trade when it's not fair. This is complete mercantilist system, as reciprocity just showed the American people. The American people didn't know that all these tariffs and trade barriers were up against our allies that we're underwriting. This is the whole thing like with Europe. In Europe, it's quite frankly, we've been underwriting your defense since World War II, and we're kind of underwriting your prosperity. That's going to end. We're going to get prosperous here. President Trump is just wrong. The system that worked, that when we broke off of the monopolistic power of the British Crown, and one of the reasons people don't understand this, we broke off not just for political freedom, but also economic freedom. What drove the revolutionary generation as much as the suppression of their first free speech, that we couldn't even do cartoons about the king and pamphlets or we'd be shut down, was also what the crown did in corrupting, the crown and the aristocracy did in corrupting commons and giving monopolistic power to things, to entities like the British East India Company or other industrial combines. That what England had gotten to at that time was kind of how the United States runs today, right? Oligarchic power with state power combined, you have a system. That's what our revolution broke away from. And what happened? A document that's just as dear to us, economic populists and nationalists, as the Declaration of Independence, which is really a declaration of war against the empire, and the Constitution, which try to get this thing organized later, is the Report on Manufacturers by Alexander Hamilton, who's a true economic nationalist. That's the third founding document of the United States. And what happened from the American plan from the beginning of the from the beginning of the country right after the Revolution all the way up to the early 20th century, and particularly through McKinley, we certainly protected. And some of the biggest protectionists of protection our native industries were not just Alexander Hamilton, but a guy named Abraham Lincoln, right? And then McKinley, they understood, and this is what drove us. Although the Industrial Revolution started in England, we rapidly became an industrial superpower. Why? Because of a smart system of tariffs. The free trade is a masturbatory fantasy. It doesn't exist in the real world. They're gaming the system. And the Chinese Communist Party, which quite frankly, Thatcher and Reagan set the basis for the opening up of both and the shipping. They didn't do it. That was Bush and the globalists later. But to ship all the high value added jobs from England and the United States to ship it to China so they could leverage the slave labor of Lao Beijing. So these people have been called out. The thing I love so much about reciprocity in this, of all the original ideas President Trump has, and the build the wall and deportations, all that, which, by the way, everything he told us he would do, he's done. And now the southern border is totally secure 65 days into his presidency, which just shows you how corrupt the imperial capital, Washington, D.C., with this huge bill. But President Trump, the idea that's burned in him from the beginning, from the 1980s and 90s, go back and look at the interviews, is Lou Dobbs on CNN talking about the trade deficit, talking about the time Japan, but ultimately China, ripping off the United States and all of our jobs. This has been an obsession of his from the beginning. And yesterday, I couldn't have been prouder. For your audience that hasn't seen it, take time and watch the entire speech. It is one of the 2, 3, or 4 most powerful speeches Trump's ever given. Totally on point. The stagecraft was perfect. They took the Rose Garden, which is right outside the Oval Office, and they put the flags up in between each column. It was so powerful. And the message was on point. It was said with authority, and then inspired. He brought up union workers. To actually talk about how much they loved it and how much this was going to help rejuvenate the automotive industry.
You talk about declaring economic war on the Chinese Communist Party,
Yeah.
but these
I think we
tariffs,
did.
these tariffs also impacted, or perhaps even declared economic war on your own allies, the European Union, Britain,
Who are the
Canada.
give me the allies again? Who are the
European
allies?
Union,
Here's what I
Canada,
consider. Here's what I
Britain,
consider.
Australia.
I am so insulted by you using the term allies. Allies supposed to be somebody in something together. The European elites are total and complete deadbeats. I was the guy on point in the first administration. I had to be a supplicant to ask you guys, would you please consider getting up to the 2 and 2.5% that you committed after you forced your way into Ukraine in 2014? You realized you were going to have a fight on your hands. You actually realized we have to get to 2% or 2.5%, which none of you did. Only the Brits came close and later the Poles. And if you look at really, in particular the Germans, the Italians, some of these people are horrible. The French, if you actually look at where the defense budget goes, it's not going to combined arms operation. It's not going to maneuvers. It's not going
pensions.
it would go into pensions or women's health care or climate change. Climate change is the big one. It's all phony. It's all fake. You haven't been an ally forever. You can't pull your weight. If you took the United States out of Western Europe today militarily, the whole thing would collapse. We're the infrastructure and the backbone of everything. It's completely unacceptable. This is why they praise Joe Biden. If you read the new books coming about Joe Biden, own chiefs of staff, they had to tell him, hey, you're not the president of NATO. Because he kept sitting there babbling, well, you know, the NATO guys really love me. They love me. Of course, you're giving them everything. The Western European people must understand that their elites have not been allies to the United States. You've looked at the burden of everything, of manpower, right, of defense. Right now, you call yourself an ally? In the Red Sea right now, we have 2 carrier battle groups. That's about 24,000 sailors doing airstrikes on the Houthis to keep the Red Sea open, to keep the Suez Canal open, to keep trade going to Europe so your prices don't explode. And you know what we have down there? Last I saw, you have, I think, 1 British destroyer, 1 French frigate, 1 Italian corvette. You don't even take seriously your own thing. So how can we take you seriously? You're not allies. You don't act like allies. What you do is you bitch and you moan when the United States says, hey, look, we just can't do this forever. We have a $1 trillion defense budget, and we got to cut the defense budget. We're going to cut spending because we have a $2 trillion deficit every year. People should understand the signal that President Trump is sending every day about Greenland is about the defense of Europe. To wit, the Russian army's your problem. The Russian Navy's our problem. We get some sort of partnership or alliance or something with Greenland. Maybe even they become a territory, whatever that form is. We get those naval bases that President Trump,
Hey, what's up, guys? If you're an Uber or Lyft driver like me, this LED sign is a game changer. Just stick it on before your shift. No chargers, no messy cables. My riders used to miss my car all the time, especially at night. Now, they see me right away. Bright, clean, and super easy to use. Hey, what's up, guys? If you're an Uber or Lyft driver like me, this LED sign is a game changer. Just stick it on before your shift. No chargers, no messy cables. My riders used to miss my car all the time, especially at night. Now, they see me right away. Bright, clean, and super easy to use. Hey, what's up, guys? If you're an Uber or Lyft driver like me, this LED sign is a game changer. Just stick it on before your shift. No chargers, no messy cables. My riders used to miss my car all the time, especially at night. Now, they see me right away. Bright, clean, and super easy to use.
After you become the 47th president, what are you going to do to stop the war in Ukraine?
Yeah.
So I would literally start calling, not from the day I took over, but from the night I won. And I'd call two people.
Two people.
You know who the two people are? Putin, right? You know who Putin is? And Zelensky.
Zelensky.
And I'd say, we're going to meet. We're going to
That's how he would say. He would get on the phone and he'd go, "We're gonna meet."
meet. And I guarantee I could work that out.
Oh, man.
I guarantee. I know exactly what I'd say, by the way. I know exactly. I tell one guy this, and I tell one guy that, and I say, you better make a deal.
Trump's foreign policy ideas, extremely convincing to 9-year-olds.
After you become the 47th president, what are you going to do to stop the...
I could tell you to go.
Jew haters. Anti-Semitic.
I'm very proud of that. You're proud of what? You're a Jew hater. 2,000 years of persecution over here. You're a terror supporter. Terror supporter. That's what you are. 2,000 years of persecution not enough for you. Zionists go to our Jewish land.
Jew haters. Anti-Semitic.
You know, I said it once, I said it 100 times. I'm not a perfect person. I make mistakes. My friends have been blowing me up, informing me that it's Dragonite, not Charmeleon. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. It's Dragonite. I messed up my Pokemon. Damn. Hey, y'all.
Basically a bypass tree is what I'm going to say. So, and if you go back to the testing Trooper Paul was doing with Karen Reed, you could hear how loud her vehicle is when it revs up and reverses at that speed at that time. So, like, the amount of noise just her vehicle would have made, and then the impact, the braking, and then speeding off. All of that would have been caught. All of it. Not only that, Tommy Kelleher tried stating that, quote unquote, nothing of significance was found on his camera. I'm sorry. I think the comings and goings of all the people that were there, I think that's important. Don't we all think that? Because there's only two people that, no, three, if you're counting Higgins, 3 people that stated Brian Higgins' Jeep was in front of the mailbox. No other person has testified to seeing Brian Higgins' Jeep outside of 34 Fairview Road. So then my question is, if that is such a debate, Tommy Kelleher's camera would have picked that up. That's kind of important, so that could have been cleared up. What time they all got there. The supposed impact. What time they all left. Seeing John's body on that lawn, supposedly. All of that would have been caught on his camera. But nothing of significance was caught. A body on a front lawn is significant. So if he's saying that nothing of significance was caught on his Ring camera, then Joan's body wasn't there.
To buy shit is a special 100 and positive.
Make sure your applicants are mine.
The kids are dumb.
I have to share. P. Diddy had more money than you can get the government to give for any kind of honor. So the border's closed.
Mexico saying that I offered to send U.S. troops in.
She didn't run for the hills. She tried to grab me by the hair up the hill with her. Well, unfortunately for her, I have no hair. I'm bald as they come. And I said, nope. You're not taking me with you, ma'am. I've got evidence that you're lying. This lawyer, to protect herself, filed an injunction against me. I mean, obviously, Commonwealth Amy Ashworth made a deal with this lawyer to come after the brother that's advocating for his brother. And she's attempting to put a gag order on me. She didn't run for the hills. She tried to grab me by the hair up the hill with her. Well, unfortunately for her, I have no hair. I'm bald as they come.
Cash, here I
Deep.
Hey, mommy.
Surprise, Lily.
Can't believe what she's done.
I know, man.
Well, here's the thing. I can't tell you what you can and can't think about. You're free to.
How do you get started with digital marketing? With the complete digital marketing course on Udemy. You'll gain skills and knowledge in market research, email marketing, copywriting, social media, and more. So you can grow your confidence and land your first digital marketing gig. Sound good? Grab this course now and learn on.
What'd I tell you? XRP hit 217. 217.
The war hasn't started yet, not officially, but you can feel it in the comms traffic, in the way the ships move, in the uneasy silence of politicians who used to never shut up. You can feel it in the pulse of a system stretched too thin, in the long shadows of power left unchecked. And when that silence finally shatters, it won't be with whispers, it'll be with fire. For a long time, Earth believed it would always be the center of human civilization, the unshakable anchor to which all others would remain tethered. But the truth is, power doesn't stay in one place forever. It drifts, it shifts, it follows the path of expansion of those who dare to carve out new frontiers. And so it was that Mars, once an outpost of dust and struggle, grew into something greater.
You thought she wasn't gonna get her smile back?
No longer a sovereign world.
You thought she wasn't?
A force in its own right. What started as a terraforming project became an empire of its own making.
First, this lady
built on the
completes
backs
the
of
puzzle
those
for
who
me.
wanted more than
And
Earth's
apparently is
failed
telling me,
promises. The Martian
I'm gonna
people have
pretend
known
I fired
hardship,
you.
discipline,
I'm gonna
and
pay you
survival.
under the
They
table.
don't see themselves as second
And
to Earth
essentially,
anymore.
rewrite the
They see themselves
MGA
as
that
the
I
next
had
step.
with her. Go out
Maybe
there,
they are,
podcast,
but Mars isn't the only
be the
one who
best
broke
you
free.
can. Make sure you tell the
Colonies of
community so
Belt,
I can
Ceres,
continue
Vesta,
to protect
Pallas,
your brother.
and the thousands of stations and outposts
that
scattered
is
across the asteroid
To
field
make
were
deals
never
under the
meant to be
table
more than a
and then
workhorse, a
go to
supply
federal
chain,
court
line of
and
credits
says,
on some
wait a minute,
corporate ledger.
this
But they
007
adapted, turned cold metal
stole my
into
file,
home, turned isolation into community.
hacked my
They aren't
system.
one people,
Now that's
not
insurance
really.
fraud, by
They're
the way.
scavengers,
We're working on.
miners, traders, smugglers.
She contacted her
Some are
company
outlaws,
insurance,
some are
and now it's
dreamers,
taken
some
out
are both
just
at
about
once.
$60,000
What unites them isn't a
because
government or a flag.
insurance.
It's the
She has
knowledge
insurance.
that they have no
And supposedly
planet
I
to fall back
hacked
on,
her
no place
system.
to retreat.
I
The
mean,
belt is their only home.
what
They will defend
episodes?
it, no matter what. Then there's Titan.
I,
The corporations
listen,
carved it up long
today
ago,
I came out of
setting up
federal court,
refineries,
and this is a
research
document
facilities,
where I
orbital
got to
shipyards,
submit
all
my
in the name of
evidence
progress.
in federal
Mars
court.
is an
Now Judge
empire,
Hilton
the belt is a
is
rebellion.
looking at this.
Titan is
You
the
got
machine that
prosecutors
keeps the whole
out of
system
federal
running.
court that's looking at Commonwealth Amy
Its
Ashworth
leaders don't wear
and looking at
uniforms.
Elaine Jarvis
They wear suits,
and is
and
watching
their weapons
actively
are warships,
a
but
officer
contracts,
of the
trade
court
sanctions, and
lie
economic
in
leverage.
federal court.
They fund the wars,
Well, the best is yet
they
to come.
supply the fleets, and they make
Somebody's
sure
going to jail,
no matter who
and I
wins or
promise you,
loses,
it's not going to
their
be me.
profits only
Elaine
grow.
Jarvis, not only that you're not going to have a
Europa
bar
is
license,
different.
ma'am, you're
The
going to
icy
jail.
moon with its vast
You're going to
subsurface
jail,
ocean was meant to be a
And guess
beacon
who's
of
going to
hope,
prosecute you?
a place where science
No
and
one
discovery
other
thrive
than the same
beyond the
person
reach
that
of
sent a
politics and
subpoena
war.
to Glenn
It is
Ford.
neutral, or at least
Amy
it claims to
Ashworth,
be.
all of a
place
sudden,
of research,
wants
of
to do the
knowledge,
right thing.
of things
Well,
humanity
ma'am,
was
you're
meant
on a
to
good
reach
path.
for. But when
You
war
might want
comes
to have a
knocking,
scapegoat,
even the most peaceful
just like
places
Elaine
must choose a
Jarvis
side.
thought she had
And
herself
then there's
a
Earth, the
scapegoat.
birthplace of humanity.
She thought
The old
herself she can
empire,
have me as a
still
scapegoat.
powerful,
You might
still wealthy, but
learn
fractured.
a thing or two from
Weakened by
Elaine
its own
Jarvis.
divisions, its own complacency.
And your
Some
scapegoat
still believe in
might
Earth's right
just
to
be
rule, to bring order back to the
our
colonies,
Persian
to
princess,
reclaim what was
the
lost.
prosecutor,
Others know that era is over,
Sarah
that
Salmon.
Earth's influence is
Because
fading,
guess what?
that the future
Commonwealth
belongs
Amy
to the
Ashworth.
ones who left it behind.
I've got her on body cams
The
communicating
solar system
actively
is a
with the
fragile
investigators
web of
that
alliances,
falsified the police
deaths,
report
and betrayals.
every step of the way.
Mars and the Belt
You're gonna
have
have to
been
take
at
my
odds
word
for
for it.
years.
You don't even
Ever
have to
since Mars
subpoena
tried to
the
enforce
communication.
taxes on Belter mining
It will be
operations.
subpoenaed.
Ever since Martian patrols started boarding ships
This
without
lady
warning.
completes the
Ever
puzzle.
since a single spark could set the whole thing ablaze. The Belt wants autonomy, freedom from Martian control, but Mars sees that as rebellion. Titan, ever the
16.
I've been saying this for years. Uber and Lyft must pay their drivers more. The driver accepted a ride that cost the passengers $42, and in the end, he only made $16. This means that Uber took 62% of the total ride money. How is this right? So many drivers are being taken advantage of on a daily basis, oftentimes making even less than minimum wage, and at the same time losing big money on the depreciation and maintenance costs that are related to their cars. And all while Uber reported $9.8 billion in net income in the year 2024. They must give back to their drivers.
If you wouldn't mind.
تفتح تمي زي هيك وتحط الخير وين كان.
Quinn wasn't afraid of being on his knees. You know, I grew up in the last era where people could actually take a joke. So things like this do not offend me. As a matter of fact, half the
Water pistol, this thing shoots about 25, 30 feet, automatic. Look, this is how it works. This is a battery pack. You actually charge it up by the battery. This is your clip right here. Goes right in the bottom. Man, just think about how much fun you could have with these. Go ahead and grab two.
Hey, TikTok. So I spent most of the day in DC from the morning until late afternoon, and people have been talking about the False Claims Act and KETAM, and part of that is you have to serve the DOJ and the U.S. Attorney's Office. But if you're at the U.S. Attorney's Office, right there, they don't answer the door. It's not open. It's locked. So it would have to be done through like certified mail, even though it is in the same building. And crypto. Houston, IGI.
opportunist has been playing both sides, supplying the belt with weapons under the table while maintaining trade with Mars to keep its shipyards running. And Earth watches, waiting, unsure whether to intervene or let the colonies tear each other apart. For now, the war hasn't started, not officially. There are still treaties, still negotiations, still diplomats pretending they can keep the peace. But peace is a dying thing, and you can hear its last breaths in the comms chatter, in the quiet movement of fleets repositioning themselves, in the way every faction is waiting for the others to make the first mistake. Maybe it'll be a Martian patrol firing on a Belter freighter. Maybe a Titan-backed mercenary force will stage a false flag attack to push Mars into war. Maybe Earth will finally make its move, desperate to reclaim control. Maybe it doesn't matter who strikes first, because once the first shot is fired, there will be no turning back. The old order is crumbling. The new one hasn't been decided yet. But when the first engines ignite, when the first ships open fire, when the first cities go dark, know that it didn't start here. It started long before, in every broken promise, in every unchecked ambition, in every moment when peace was just an illusion. This is your signal in the void. I'll be here when the war begins. I just hope some of you will still be around to listen. This is your voice in the dark, your signal in the void. And if you're listening, then you already know something has happened, something irreversible, something that cannot be undone. The war we all felt coming, the war we whispered about in hushed voices, the war we tried to pretend would never come, it has begun. It didn't start with a grand declaration. No president or prime minister or premier stood in front of a flag and announced it to the world. It started the way all wars do, with a single act of violence, with a single moment where someone, maybe out of fear, maybe out of desperation, maybe out of sheer malice, pulled the trigger. And the moment that happened, the future of humanity changed forever. For weeks, tensions had been escalating between Mars and the Belt. Skirmishes, political posturing, the occasional minor blockade, none of it was new. But this was different. A Martian patrol ship, MCRS Acheron, was escorting a Titanian mining hauler, Solar Wind, through the Belt. Routine, they claimed. Standard protocol, they said. The Belt, of course, saw it differently. Titan's trade deals had been playing both sides for too long, supplying Martian shipyards while smuggling arms to Belter resistance cells. It was only a matter of time before Mars got tired of the game. And the Belt, they were tired of being stepped on. The convoy was passing near Palace Station when it happened. The details are still murky, and every faction is spinning their own version of events. But the facts, those cold, brutal facts, remain. A Belter frigate, the CNS Imani, intercepted the convoy, demanded the Titanian ship turn around, demanded that the Martians leave Belter territory. The Martian captain, Commander Elias Rains, refused. He ordered the Solar Wind to continue. That's when the warnings turned into action. The Imani launched a spread of warning shots. Nothing direct, just a show of force. That should have been the end of it. A standard standoff, a bit of chest thumping, maybe a few angry messages passed between diplomats. But something went wrong. Some say it was a sensor glitch. Some say it was a nervous Martian gunner with an itchy trigger finger. Some say the Belt meant to escalate all along. No one knows for sure, and maybe we never will. But what we do know is this. The Acheron opened fire. A single railgun round, moving at nearly 20 kilometers per second, slammed into the Imani before the Belter ship could react. The round struck amidships, tearing through pressure compartments, splitting the vessel open like a tin can. Within moments, more than 100 Belters were dead, their bodies vented into the void, their ship reduced to nothing but a rapidly expanding debris field. The Martians claimed it was self-defense. The Belt called it murder. The moment the news hit Palace, ships had mobilized. Within a day, Mars had declared the attack an unfortunate but justified act of protection. And within a week, the first major battle of the war had begun. The Belt struck back with fury. They had no fleets, not like Mars or Earth, but they had something else. They had numbers. They had speed. And most importantly, they had nothing to lose. Belters had lived their entire lives in the cold, unyielding vacuum of space. They knew how to adapt, how to improvise, how to use the very rocks around them as weapons. Within hours of the Palace incident, civilian freighters were being retrofitted into warships. Cargo haulers had their hulls stripped down, engines reinforced, missile racks welded onto their spines. Martian patrol routes were mapped and ambush points set. They were outgunned, outmatched, but they weren't about to go down without a fight. The first true engagement came at Vesta Drift, an ore processing station orbiting Vesta. Mars, expecting an easy show of force, dispatched a small fleet. 2 light cruisers, 4 destroyers, a handful of corvettes. They assumed the Belt would scatter, that they'd surrender, that they'd fall in line like they always had. But the Belters had learned. They didn't meet the Martians in open battle. Instead, they lured them into a tight gravity well, using the station itself as cover. The first Martian ships entered the kill zone without realizing it. Then, in a flash, it happened. A single Belter vessel, an old mining barge with barely functional life support, burned hard toward the lead Martian cruiser at suicidal speed. It had no weapons, no armor, nothing to suggest it was a threat. The Martians barely gave it a second glance, until it detonated. It wasn't carrying ore, it was carrying a warhead, one of Titan's own experimental antimatter charges, bought on the black market for a sum no one could trace. The explosion tore through the cruiser's hull, igniting its fusion core. In an instant, the MCRS Tharsis was gone, taking half of its escort ships with it. The rest of the Martian fleet scattered in the chaos, desperately trying to regroup as Belter ships swarmed them from the shadows. It was the first true Belter victory, and it wouldn't be the last. But Mars was not about to take such an insult lightly. Retaliation came swiftly. The MCRS Dauntless, a heavy assault carrier, launched from Phobos with an entire battle group in tow. Their target, Ceres, the beating heart of the Belt. Mars knew they couldn't allow the Belters to think they could win, so they decided to make an example of them. When the fleet arrived, the message was clear: surrender or burn. The Belters refused. What followed was less of a battle and more of a massacre. Martian railguns cut through station defenses like they were paper. Orbital bombardment turned civilian habitats into debris fields. Thousands died, many before they even had the chance to fight. By the time it was over, Ceres was no longer a thriving hub of trade. It was a graveyard. And just like that, the war was no longer about trade disputes, no longer about politics. It was about survival. Earth, watching from a distance, tried to broker peace. The UN issued statements, condemned the violence, called for ceasefires. But it was too late. Titan, seeing profit in chaos, began arming both sides even more. Europa, once neutral, now found its scientific enclaves torn between allegiances, caught in a war they wanted no part of. And in the deep shadows beyond the Belt, whispers spoke of something else, something darker. This is no longer just a fight between Mars and the Belt. This is a war that will consume the entire system. And I'll be here, broadcasting from the edge of it all, as the fire spreads. Because this was just the spark. The real war hasn't even begun yet.
Hello, Manassas. Doug King, your chief of police here. During my time as your interim city manager, it provided me the opportunity
This is your voice in the
to
dark,
reevaluate
your
the
last
police
signal
department's
before the
programs and
silence.
policies.
If you're
While we
still
have been
listening,
successful
then you
for
know
over
that
20
everything has
years
changed.
in the
That spark
accreditation
we spoke
programs
of,
through
that
CALEA,
single shot at
achieving both
Palace,
flagship
it's
and
no
gold
longer a
standard,
footnote in history. It's a
we
beginning,
needed to look
a
at
bloody,
and change
merciless
our
beginning.
mission and vision
The
statements.
war has started,
I wanted
and
to
there is
share
no
those with
turning
you
back.
today
We've
because
all
they
crossed
set
a
the
threshold that
foundation
cannot be
with how
undone.
we will police police
And now
the
the
city of
first true
Manassas
battle of
in the
the
future.
worlds has been fought.
The Manassas City Police
It wasn't
Department
just a
mission
skirmish,
statement.
not another border
In
clash or
partnership
trade dispute
with the
dressed in
community, we
military
will promote
uniforms.
public safety
It was a
and reduce the
declaration
fear of
written in
crime
blood and
by
wreckage,
practicing
burned
fair and
across the
impartial
blackness of
policing
space for
and
all to
pursuing
see.
justice with
No
the
more
compassion
backroom
and
deals,
respect
no more
while
diplomatic
maintaining
bargaining.
the highest level of
This was
standards
war in its rawest
demanded
form.
of professional
The
law
kind that
enforcement.
leaves stations gutted,
The Manassas
cities
City
turned to ash,
Police Department
and
vision
families
statement.
whispering their last prayers
The Manassas
before
City
the void
Police
claims
Department
them.
will practice fair and impartial
It
policing,
began in the skies
treat
above
people with
Vesta,
dignity
but
and
that
respect,
wasn't the true
while
battlefield.
adopting a department
No,
culture
the
that
real war
embraces
was fought in
community
the cold
policing,
corridors of
inclusive
Ceres,
leadership,
in the
and
mining
holds
shafts of
each other
Callisto,
accountable
and in the
to
hearts
build
of
a
the
safer
soldiers who
community
fired the first
and
shots
professional
with shaking
organization.
hands.
Leadership
Mars had
statement.
struck back
As a
with
member of the
precision
City of
that only a
Manassas
military
leadership team,
superpower could
our
muster.
vision is to foster
And
a
the belt,
culture of
for all its
continuous
defiance,
improvement
was learning the
where we
cost of
embrace
resistance.
innovation
But
and
that did not
challenges,
mean they would kneel.
learn from our failures,
No, the first
and
battle may have
celebrate
been a
our
Martian
collective
assault,
successes
but the belt
through inclusive
was
leadership.
about to show the system just how
The
far
Manassas City
desperation
Police
could push a
values
people.
as a modern
Mars came with
professional
fire
law
and
enforcement
steel.
organization.
The MCRS
We
Dauntless,
value
the pride of the Martian
personal
fleet, had taken orbit above Ceres, its hull gleaming red against the pale light of the sun.
of what
It wasn't
we want
alone.
our staff to do.
A full battle
By
group
working
escorted
together
it, 2
with
heavy
our community,
cruisers, 6
we will
destroyers,
make
a
the
dozen
city of
smaller
Manassas a
corvettes and
safer
support
community.
ships. A force designed to overwhelm, to send a message. The belt had fired upon Mars. Now Mars would show them the consequences.
How is it going?
Going good, Mom. This is my friend Bobby from work.
I'm
The largest
sorry.
colony in the
Yeah,
belt
Bobby, we shot.
was never meant for war.
Come on.
It was a
I
city
like
of
to
miners,
have.
traders, smugglers, engineers, people who lived in the shadows of greater powers, scraping out a life in the cold silence of space. But when the Martians arrived, they found that the belt had learned from history.
Hi. I need
There
your
would be no
address,
surrender.
please. You're going to be issued
The
referrals.
Martians expected an easy fight.
Don't shut the
Their
door.
orbital
Do not shut the
superiority
door.
meant
Get
that
your
any
ID now.
surface defenses
And all
Ceres
your
had
roommates
were
have to come down here,
negligible at
please.
best. The station's railguns, old and poorly
Get the girl. What do you
maintained,
mean?
could never match the precision
That's a
of
different
Martian
house.
warships.
That's not you? No, I'm so sorry for bothering you.
No,
it's okay. That's just not
They
us.
never
How do you
had.
get to there? It's that door right there.
As the first waves of Martian
That's
ground
okay.
troops
I
entered the
was just like
station,
really
the
confused
Belters
because I
lured
was
them in,
asleep. Well,
driving
your
them
windows are
deeper
right
into
above
the
yours,
maze
so we
of
assumed it was
tunnels
22.
and habitats
No,
that made up
22.
Ceres.
That's 20. It's
The
20.
Martians
I'm
fought
just
like
they're
soldiers,
upstairs.
disciplined and methodical.
Yeah, guys.
The Belters
I know
fought
some
like
girls are out with
survivors,
that, but
ruthless
tell me.
and
Well, thank you.
unpredictable.
Not have a good
The
night.
fighting in the corridors was
Sorry about
brutal.
that.
Martian power armor was tough, but in tight, airless spaces, firepower mattered less than knowing the terrain.
Yeah.
Belters blew open airlocks, sealed off bulkheads, used the very structure of the station against their invaders. They turned mining charges into improvised explosives, shut down life support in occupied sections, forcing Martian soldiers to burn through their oxygen supplies faster than planned. It was a battle of attrition, the cunning of sheer willpower. But in the end, it didn't matter. Mars had the numbers, Mars had the resources, and Mars had no intention of letting Ceres slip from their grasp. By the end of the third day, the station belonged to them.
Student IDs.
The Belt had fought viciously, but the cost had
Give me
been
your student
catastrophic.
ID.
I think I have the
More than
right to ask
70,000
Okay, so now you're
dead.
going to get another referral
Miners,
for not
workers,
for
civilians
non-compliance.
caught in the crossfire.
It's non-compliant.
Many
I'm
never
just
even had
asking
the
why.
chance to fight.
You guys want to sit up
Martian
there and yell
railguns had
stupid
punched through whole sections of the
raise
station,
all kinds of issues
collapsing
with us while we're trying to do
venting
work and
habitats,
interfere with our
turning
team?
homes into tombs.
Yes, you
The
absolutely are.
survivors
It's
were
all on
forced
my
into
camera.
containment
Give me
zones,
your ID.
their leaders
immediately.
executed, their weapons confiscated. The
ID
message was clear.
immediately.
The Belt had dared to challenge
Get your
Mars.
roommates. I need their
Now
IDs as
Mars
well.
had made them pay.
Can I come back to you in
Nope.
like a minute?
But
Nope.
what Mars failed to
Don't shut the door.
understand was that the Belt had never expected to win this
You
battle.
think this is a game?
They had only needed to endure long enough
Get your
to light a
ID
fuse.
now.
Ceres was a slaughter, but it was not the
No,
end.
you're not shutting your
It
door.
was the beginning.
Get your ID
I have
now.
to
Mars was busy celebrating its victory, while its officers were congratulating themselves on the swift reclamation of Martian territory.
Get your ID.
The Belt was already moving. You see, for all its firepower, for all its might, Mars had made a mistake.
I'm the only
It had
roommate
focused
here.
on the
No,
Belt's
you're not.
weaknesses.
I want
On
all
its
the
lack
girls'
of
names up.
warships, its lack of trained
I'm just
soldiers, its lack of heavy defenses. But Mars had forgotten that the belt
That's fine, that's fine.
made
The
of
university can contact
was
you
made
guys.
of rock.
We need your ID though.
Asteroids were the belt's greatest strength. And in the wake of the Ceres massacre, the belt turned them into weapons.
You have your Give here.
A fleet of Belter mining ships, cargo haulers, and retrofitted freighters had gathered near
Do you know why we're talking to you?
Mars had assumed they were refugees.
Everything that you guys were up there yelling at us is on our phone. So every time we turned around, we see your faces, so everything that was going on is on
Singular objective.
We just put
To
them
remind Mars that the belt
No,
did
you're
not
not
die quietly.
12 and all that. That's
The attack came swift and
telling us we got too many cop
The Iron
cars,
Wind,
telling
as
us
the
they were in the
belt
way of
called
your
it, was
pizza.
unlike anything
We don't need
Mars
3
had
cops
ever
for one
faced.
kid.
The coordinated
You've been up there
barrage of
talking
redirected
is what you've
asteroids,
been doing.
accelerated by mass drivers and railgun propulsion,
And now it's
aimed
not fun
directly
for
at
you no
Martian
more.
military installations across the system. The first target was Deimos Station,
Sure, it'll be real fun for you Monday morning.
shipyard and resupply point orbiting Mars'
I have my
smaller moon.
paper one.
It was
What was the one I
obliterated
see
in
in
a
the
matter
front
of
right there? Is that
minutes.
your fake one or something?
The incoming rock
No,
struck
no,
the
what's the one up
force of
front?
nuclear warheads,
The fake one.
reducing
What's that? What's
Martian
his no?
defenses to
What's
glowing
right there?
This
wreckage,
is mine right here.
Okay, so now we're gonna play that game too.
How old are you?
Then came the strike
Brenda's
on
idea.
Phobos dockyard,
And you're drunk.
another key Martian naval stronghold.
I can smell the alcohol
Two
in
of
you.
Mars'
Give me your
cargo
ID.
ships,
Give me your ID
still in
and turn around and you're
construction,
under
were
arrest for
vaporized before they ever had a chance to leave dry dock. The final blow came at Erebus City, the largest Martian colony on the surface. Though shielded by advanced planetary defenses, the belt managed to slip a smaller asteroid through the gaps, slamming it into a key geothermal power station. The resulting blackout plunged half the colony into darkness, leaving Mars vulnerable for the first time in its history. Ceres had fallen, but Mars had bled, and now for the first time, the system stood divided not just by ideology, but by war. Earth, the aging empire, was watching. Some factions wanted peace, others wanted to profit. The Lunar Commonwealth, Earth's most powerful military faction, was already debating intervention. Titan, ever the opportunist, was preparing to sell arms to both sides. Europa, the once neutral scientific enclave, was being dragged into the conflict as its resources became valuable to both factions. And out in the deep reaches of the Kuiper Belt, where silence reigned and the shadows stretched long, whispers spoke of something else. Something that neither Mars nor the Belt had yet considered. This war, it wasn't going to be won in a single battle. It was going to be fought until the stars themselves burned out. This is your voice in the dark. This is your last signal before the silence. And if you're listening, then you already know. The War of Worlds has begun.
Just when I feel like
This is your voice in the dark, your last signal before the silence. If you're still out there, if you can still hear me, then you know the truth by now. There's no stopping this war. The first shot has been fired, the first blood spilled, and the first cities turned to dust. Mars struck Ceres with fire and fury, crushing its defiance under iron boots. The belt answered with rock and ruin, sending asteroids screaming into Martian strongholds. And now, like vultures circling a dying beast, the last of the great powers is making its move. Earth has been watching, Earth has been waiting, and now Earth is about to pick a side. The question wasn't if Earth would intervene. It was when and on whose behalf. The old world may have lost its grip on the stars, but it had never lost its hunger for control. For decades, it had played the role of a withered empire, pretending to be disinterested, pretending to let its former colonies go their own way. But Earth had never stopped pulling the strings. The mega corporations that owned the mines, the banks that controlled the flow of credits, the political alliances that shaped entire economies. They were still tied to the cradle of humanity. And now, the old empire was stirring, stretching its fingers toward the chaos, ready to shape the war to its own advantage. But which side would it choose? Would it throw its weight behind Mars, the militaristic juggernaut it had once nurtured before losing control? Or would it back the belt, the desperate underdogs fighting against oppression, the same oppression that Earth had once inflicted on Mars? The answer was more complicated than anyone wanted to admit, because Earth was not one voice. It was a cacophony of power struggles, shifting alliances and backroom deals. And even now, as war raged across the solar system, the factions of Earth were still arguing over which path would serve them best. The Earth government, what was left of it, was fractured. It had long since lost the unified control it once wielded over the planet. Now, power belonged to three major factions, each vying for dominance, each with its own agenda, and each with its own reasons for choosing a side. The Lunar Commonwealth, Earth's military elite, wanted to back Mars. They saw the Red Planet as the rightful rulers of space, a disciplined force capable of maintaining order. To them, the belt was chaos incarnate, anarchists, pirates, terrorists. They believed that if Earth supported Mars now, it could secure a powerful ally for future conflicts. The United Nations Corporate Assembly, UNCA, the economic heart of Earth, was more pragmatic. Their interest was in controlling the flow of resources, and the war threatened their profits. They didn't care who won, as long as they could manipulate the outcome to keep the supply chains intact. Some favored Mars, seeing it as a stable partner, while others saw an opportunity to exploit the belt's desperation by selling them weapons and supplies. And then there was the Terran Restoration Front, TERF, the populist movement that had gained influence in recent years. They saw the war as a chance to regain Earth's dominance. They wanted to weaken both Mars and the belt, ensuring that neither could challenge Earth's authority in the long run. They advocated for Earth to play both sides, fueling the conflict until both factions were too weak to resist when Earth made its final move. For weeks, the debates raged. Secret meetings were held in orbital stations, encrypted transmissions flickered between corporate boardrooms and military command centers. The decision was too important to rush, too dangerous to miscalculate. But in the end, it was not ideology that made Earth's choice. It was fear. Earth might have hesitated, might have delayed its decision for months, even years. But Mars and the belt did not wait. And when the war arrived at Earth's doorstep, there was no longer time for debate. The first attack did not come from Mars. It did not come from the belt. It came from the shadows, from a force no one had been paying attention to. Luna had always been Earth's greatest military stronghold. A fortress world, shielded by defense grids, bristling with warships, home to the largest stockpile of nuclear warheads in human history. It was the backbone of the Lunar Commonwealth, the command center for Earth's fleets. And it was supposed to be untouchable. But nothing is untouchable in war. On the night of the attack, Lunar Command was still locked in negotiations discussing how best to support Mars. Then the explosions began. At first they thought it was sabotage. Then they saw the ships. Not Martian warships, not Belter freighters, but something else. A rogue fleet made up of mercenaries, defectors, and outcasts. A force that did not fight for a nation, but for themselves. They called themselves the Black Horizon, and they were not interested in alliances. They were interested in power, and they had chosen this moment to stake their claim. The Black Horizon had been lurking in the outer system for years, operating in the lawless regions beyond Neptune, striking at isolated colonies, raiding supply lines. No one had taken them seriously, until now. They struck Luna with terrifying precision. Explosives planted in docking bays, cyber attacks crippling defense systems, boarding parties infiltrating key installations. Within hours, entire sectors of the moon were in chaos. Warships turned their guns inward, firing at invaders who had already slipped inside their defenses. Civilian habitats were caught in the crossfire. Millions watched in horror as explosions Pacific. That was the moment Earth made its decision. The attack on Luna changed everything. Earth could no longer afford to wait. The Lunar Commonwealth demanded immediate retaliation. The UNCA saw an opportunity to seize control of military operations. The TRF called for vengeance against the Belt, claiming, without evidence, that Belter terrorists had assisted in the attack. And in the chaos, Mars saw its chance. Within hours of the Luna attack, Martian diplomats arrived on Earth, offering their assistance. They proposed an alliance, a full-scale military partnership between Earth and Mars, a unified front against the Belt and any other threats that emerged. The Belt, meanwhile, pleaded for Earth's neutrality. They argued that they had nothing to do with the Luna attack, that Mars was manipulating the situation to crush them once and for all, but they had no leverage, no power to force Earth's hand. And so the decision was made. On March 17, 2219, Earth officially joined the war on the side of Mars. The Terran-Martian alliance was born. The Belt was now facing the full force of two superpowers. The war was no longer a fight for independence. It was a battle for survival. And as the first Earth-Mars fleets began their march toward Belt-controlled space, another force watched from the darkness, unseen, waiting. Because the Black Horizon had not come for nothing. They had come to set the system on fire. This is your voice in the dark. This is your last signal before the silence. And if you're listening, then you already know. The war has only just begun. This is your voice in the dark. Your last signal before the silence. If you're still listening, then you already know. The war is no longer just Mars against the Belt. Earth has made its choice. The Terran-Martian alliance is now official, and the Belt is outnumbered, outgunned, and outmaneuvered. But in war, numbers are not everything. The first true test of this new alliance was not fought over the dry deserts of Mars or the industrial strongholds of Earth. It was fought in the deep, cold dark, a battle for the heart of the asteroid belt itself, a battle for Ceres. Ceres was more than just a rock. It was the Belt's capital, the largest dwarf planet between Mars and Jupiter, and the home of over 2 million Belters. It was a lifeline, a hub of trade and industry, the only place in the Belt with anything close to Earth-like gravity. It was where the Council of Free States, what passed for a Belter government, met. To the Belt, losing Ceres meant losing everything. Mars knew this. Earth knew this. That was why, before the ink had even dried on their new alliance, the first joint military operation between Earth and Mars was already in motion. They called it Operation Iron Net, a massive fleet mobilization aimed at cutting Ceres off from the rest of the Belt. Martian warships, sleek and lethal, took point, while Earth's aging but formidable navy followed behind, providing logistical support and raw firepower. The plan was simple: block all supply lines, bombard key installations, and then send in the troops to secure the station. They expected a swift victory. They expected the Belters to surrender. They underestimated just how much the Belt was willing to fight. The first shots were fired on approach. As the combined Earth-Mars fleet neared Ceres, the Belt struck first, not with warships, those they could not afford to lose, but with the one weapon they had in abundance: asteroids. For months, the Belters had been preparing for this moment, knowing that if war came, Ceres would be the first target. Using automated drones, they had quietly maneuvered dozens of high-velocity rocks into place, waiting for the right moment. When the Terran-Martian fleet entered range, Belters unleashed them. Kilometer-wide boulders came screaming out of the darkness, accelerated to lethal speeds by mass drivers hidden among the debris fields. The first wave of impacts shattered 2 Martian destroyers, sending their remains spiraling into the void. A third took a direct hit to its engine core, detonating in a flash of nuclear fire. Earth's fleet fared no better. The aging dreadnought ESV Titans struggled to track the trajectories of the incoming projectiles. The once organized formation dissolved as ships dodged, weaved, and scrambled to avoid destruction. It was a tactical masterpiece, a desperate but brilliant gambit that stalled the invasion for hours, but it could not stop it. The second wave came in hard. Martian dropships descended onto Ceres' surface, punching through its thin atmosphere and landing in the domed cities below. Earth's mechanized infantry followed, deploying shock troops in heavy armor, their weapons optimized for close quarters combat in the tight corridors of the underground tunnels. The fighting was brutal. Belters, outnumbered and under-equipped, fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal. They used mining explosives as improvised bombs, sabotaged life support systems, and turned every corridor into a death trap. Martian soldiers found themselves ambushed in pitch-dark tunnels, their suits slashed open by sharpened tools. Earth's forces, more accustomed to planetary warfare, struggled to adapt to the low-gravity environment, their movements sluggish and unnatural. But in the end, the firepower of Earth and Mars grew too much. After 3 days of relentless combat, Ceres fell. When the dust
Hey, yo, brother, did you order a DoorDash? Did you happen to order a DoorDash?
No.
Okay.
It's all the
Thank you.
guys in there, I would
All right.
assume.
Thanks a lot, man.
Sectors of the station had been reduced to rubble, and those who survived faced a grim future under occupation. The belt had lost its capital. Mars declared victory. Earth called it a necessary step for stabilizing the system. The media painted it as a triumph of order over chaos. But to the belt, it was not a battle. It was a massacre. And if Mars and Earth thought this war would end with Ceres, they were wrong. Because in the far reaches of the solar system was about to take place. While the battle for Ceres raged, a different kind of war was unfolding on the icy moon of Titan. Titan had always been unique. Saturn's largest moon, rich in hydrocarbons, its thick atmosphere making it one of the few places outside Earth where surface operations were feasible without full vacuum gear. It had long been a hub for research and energy production, with both Earth and Mars maintaining a presence there. But unlike Ceres, Titan had not chosen a side. It was a neutral zone, a last bastion of diplomacy, a place where representatives from all factions still met, where uneasy truces were negotiated, until someone decided neutrality was no longer an option. The betrayal came from within. A high-ranking officer of the Martian Intelligence Bureau, Colonel Adrian Kovas, defected to Earth. He carried with him classified documents, battle strategies, fleet positions, and the locations of hidden Martian supply depots. It was the single greatest intelligence leak in the history of the war, and it could not be allowed to stand. Mars responded immediately. In a move that shocked even their own allies, Martian forces launched a covert strike on Titan, assassinating Kovas and seizing key infrastructure. They hacked orbital defense grids, disabled Earth's early warning systems, and took control of the moon's refineries and transport hubs. The assault was over in hours. Titan belonged to Mars. Earth, blindsided and enraged, called it a betrayal. The alliance was barely weeks old, and already Mars had made a move against its supposed partner. Tensions skyrocketed. Earth demanded an explanation. Mars gave none. Behind the scenes, Earth's military commanders began questioning the wisdom of their alliance. If Mars was willing to turn on Earth now, what would stop them from doing it again? Of broken trust, the belt saw an opportunity. The fall of Ceres had nearly broken the belt, but the betrayal on Titan changed everything. For the first time, whispers of a third front emerged, a faction, a coalition of rogue Earth generals, disillusioned Belter commanders, and defectors from Mars who saw what was coming. They had no official name yet. Some called them the Separatists, others the True Alliance. But their goal was clear: stop Mars before it was too late. They would strike where Mars least expected. They would hit supply lines, sabotage warships, turn Mars's own weapons against them, and when the time was right, they would make their move. Because the war was no longer just Earth and Mars against the belt. first battles have been fought, the first betrayals have begun, and the real war is just getting started. This part expands on the first major battles, the fall of Ceres, and the shocking betrayal at Titan, setting the stage for the war to fracture into multiple factions. Let me know what you think, and I'll continue with part. This is your voice in the dark, your last signal before the silence. If you're still listening, then you already know. The war is no longer a clean battle line drawn between Earth, Mars, and the Belt. The betrayal of Titan shattered whatever fragile alliances still held. The fall of Ceres was not an end, but a beginning. And now, with the Belt's capital under occupation, the war has entered its next phase. The phase where wars are not won by grand fleets and planetary invasions, but by the desperate, the hidden, the ones who strike from the shadows. The guerrilla war has begun. Ceres had fallen. The Terran Martian Alliance controlled the Belt's largest station, its economy, and what remained of its governing body. But control, as Mars and Earth quickly discovered, did not mean peace. With every passing day, their occupation forces found themselves in a war they had not trained for. The Belters did not fight like Earth's rebels or Mars's resistance movements. They had no front lines, no headquarters, no clear chain of command. They were everywhere and nowhere at once. Sabotage became their greatest weapon. The first major strike came within a week of Ceres' fall. The Martian dreadnought, the MCRN Hammerfall, was docked for refueling at Ceres' main orbital platform. Its reactors suddenly exploded. Official reports blamed the mechanical failure, but everyone knew the truth. Belter engineers had infiltrated the barrier, rigged the fuel pumps, and turned the ship into a floating ball. The blast killed over 3,000 Martian and Earth soldiers, and left Ceres' bright orbit in chaos for days. It was just the beginning. Across the asteroid belt, supply depots mysteriously vented oxygen into space, dooming entire crews. Mining drones turned into guided missiles, slamming into occupied stations. Data networks collapsed under relentless cyber attacks, leaving fleets blind and deaf. Even routine patrols were no longer safe. Belter ships running dark in a vast debris fields suddenly emerge, strike, and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. Earth and Mars had the numbers.
There's places that you start making you feel special. They love about you. Say you're the chosen one. Both of you, their spouses, sex. And it's all public. Eventually, they'll start coming to you and asking for spiritual advice. It started as a dream, into a nightmare. Sure, I still had the 53 Rolls Royces and my mansion in the Swiss Alps and my 19-year-old wife's sunshine room. My other 19-year-old wife, Lindsay, and my third 19-year-old wife, Calypso. Every morning, my flock would insist the less them know my presence and deliver an oration about the dictates of universal perfection. If I didn't have an answer, some actually asked me to read one of the thousands they donated. That's when I realized I had to break free. Only the last months did I realize that my 3,500 followers didn't even see me as a person. I was just a deity from the planet Calicard. And they were only using me because I could lead them into the intergalactic palace of Shalak. It's like Jesus, why do you try to get into the palace of Shalak yourself? Painted Charmani's a little busy. Even now, there's still part of me that wants to go back and have just one more ceremony, which I will learn 3-day orgies. But then I remember how sometimes my hair and beautiful young women keep begging me to sleep with them, even after my many orgasms. What kind of a mantra could Steve I was tired and just wanted to go to sleep? By the end, compound felt like hell. These days, though, I'm in a much better place. I'm so grateful that I poisoned all of them and finally escaped for good. No ads, no ads, no ads. King Shark brings you endless fun without any breaks. It's totally free. Jump into awesome tower defense action. Play round after round.
What's up, guys? Stallmatter here, and today we're going to be reacting to another actual Justice Warrior video. This one we have Ana Kasparian goes nuclear on the Kamala cult. So yeah, I'm interested to see exactly what she's upset about here, because I'm honestly surprised that Kamala even still has supporters, to be honest. She wasn't even very popular when she became vice president. Anyway, link to the original video down below. Let's jump into it.
Anything I'm not here, so I told you so. I'm just gonna go to you because, no, I'm gonna say it. You are a crappy candidate. And you are part of a group of people who provided cover for a man who was falling apart mentally speaking, but decided to run anyway. Decided to stay in the race for a month after that disastrous debate against Donald Trump. And then when Biden, the most unpopular sitting president, called you up before the debate and told you, remember, kiddo, no daylight between us, do not differentiate yourself from me, you listened. So to sit there, stand there, and give a speech about, oh, I told you so, I told you so. These are the worst people, Matt. They really are.
You gotta love Ana and the anger that she expresses at the Democratic Party for lying consistently about both of their candidates. Obviously, Joe Biden's mental state, but in addition to that Kamala Harris was the second coming.
The craziest thing about the Joe Biden thing is it was so obvious he was mentally impaired, right? Like, it was incredibly obvious, and yet people just I feel like they gaslighted themselves to not believing it because he was their political candidate, right? Because he was, he's blue team, I'm blue. Nothing's wrong with him. But it's insane to me that you hear the guy stumble over his words so much, being unable to form, I'm messing up my sentences. I'm complaining about him being unable to form sentences, but him being completely unable to form proper sentences, him wandering all over the place, falling all over the place, multiple times. When he fell off the bike, he fell down the stairs the one time, or fell up the stairs, whatever it was. Just wandered off when he was at the White House Gardens, or all of this stuff. And then people act like nothing's wrong with him. And you're supposed to believe that you're the insane person if you point it out. It was so ridiculous.
Of Barack Obama, only for us to discover in the new campaign book Fight that nobody wanted her to be the candidate, even Joe Biden, who endorsed her, who
was basically forced to endorse her by the Congressional Black Caucus, and of course by the fact that he selected her as the VP, and not endorsing her would be an admission of his failure. But even though everyone knew that, even though everyone understood that Kamala Harris was a loser, all these different various people in left-wing media were sucking up to her, were worshiping her, were pretending that she didn't just steal the nomination from Joe Biden outright, and pretended that that was not a ridiculous, unprecedented scenario in modern politics. Now, we're going to break this down. We're going to enjoy.
Honestly, had she been like the second most popular candidate in the Democratic primaries in 2020 or 2019 or whatever the fuck it was, I don't think it would have been nearly as big an issue, right? If she had been, even if she was like one of the more popular ones. The thing is, she dropped out. I think she had 3% of the vote or 5% of the vote. Like, even among Democrats, she was not popular because she's like, she's half black, she's half Indian, she's a woman, right? She was literally appointed as like a diversity hire, right, to appeal to all these different ethnic groups, to appeal to the more progressive wing of the party and all of this stuff. So it's like you put her in this position specifically as like a token in multiple ways, right? She checks all these different boxes. You can use her as a token in multiple different ways, despite the fact that she is not popular even among your own party. And then when Biden has to step down because of the way that the laws work, if they wanted to keep the money, they have to run her. They can't run somebody else. Well, then you fuck yourself.
This segment, but before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Oh, give me the money. Give me the money.
I love that.
Okay? Well, some cracks are beginning to form between Kamala Harris and her 2024 presidential running mate, Tim Walz, with the latter taking issue with something Harris said in public.
Does she blame
recently.
him for it?
Now, last week, Kamala Harris made her first public appearance in months, speaking at the Leading Women Defined Summit in California. This happened last Thursday. And she used this as an opportunity to look at American voters and say the following.
Liberty Mutual has savings for all. Mary had a little something.
We are seeing organizations stay quiet. We are seeing those who are capitulating to clearly unconstitutional threats. And these are the things that we are witnessing each day in these last few months in our country. And it understandably creates a great sense of fear. Because, there were many things that we knew would happen. Many things, I'm not here to say I told you so.
So Anna's mega rant is actually in response to Kamala Harris doing her I told you so moment, and as Anna aptly points out, Kamala Harris has been in hiding for a couple of months, ever since she left office after getting absolutely trounced in the 2024 presidential election. She has not made very many public appearances or anything of the sort, and the fact is, the Democrats are actually better for it because she is a charisma vacuum, as Anna points out in her mega rant about Kamala Harris. But of course, it's not just...
I don't know why they keep trying to run these women that have these cackling laughs. It's like one of the worst things you could possibly do, right? Like, it just makes it so easy for your political opponents to display you or to portray you as a witch. Like, I know it's unfortunate, right? Some people just have weird laughs. Some people probably think my laugh's weird, whatever. But when you cackle like a witch, and it's just such an easy, just political thing to fucking hit on, right? And it ingrains in people's minds in the way that they perceive you. And especially when it's somebody like Hillary or Kamala who are so unpersonable, and then they also have this laugh, it just doubles down on the thought process you already have about them.
Just the fact that she was a terrible candidate and that she was absolutely awful at her job as a candidate. It's also the fact that all these different people in progressive online media, and by the way, they are the usual suspects that we've talked about before, were worshiping her and lying to everybody about her, about how amazing she was, and about how, oh my God, we had this on lock. Kamala Harris is gonna win Iowa, and all these other ridiculous things that these people put forward that, of course, have gone after Anna as well. So it's essentially a two birds, one stone situation right here. And by the way, I'm totally here for that.
Okay, no, we all knew what Donald Trump was. We all knew. And for all the Democratic ass kissers out there who provided cover for the bad behavior of that administration, they directed their ire toward people like us who kept warning the Democrats, you're going to lose to Trump. You're going to lose to Trump. You're pushing unpopular policies. You're gaslighting Americans on the issue of immigration. If you do that, that creates an open.
Yeah, probably the craziest one is the trans women in sports thing, right? Even among Democrats polled, I believe it's only like 20 or 30% of them are for that, right? So you have somewhere between 15 and 10% of the population, because the population is roughly split 50-50. You have between, the Republicans are not for it, right? Save probably a few outliers, right? Just, like a handful of people that are a negligible percentage. And then even among the Democrats, 20 to 30% of them are for it, right? So you're like aggressively pushing these cultural war issues that your own side is not in majority for, and and as a total percentage of the population, only 10 to 15% of the people are for.
Just before President Trump concluded his first 100 days in office, we visited Stephen K. Bannon. He's a longtime Trump advisor and supporter who backed Trump's first campaign in 2016 and briefly served with him in the White House. We found Bannon in the War Room, which is the name of the cluttered podcast studio where he produces a daily video stream supporting his own brand of populist politics. We talked about Trump's first 100 days in office. We talked about tax rates for the wealthy. Bannon says he supports the working class. And we also talked about a constitutional crisis that Bannon says he foresees. Let's watch.
You have to look at this as a revolution, because it is a revolution. It's a revolution about the America's role in the world, our position geopolitically, the global commercial relationships, plus the administrative state and how the country's governed. And if you look at that, the various verticals we look at, it's just, he's so much farther down the path than I think, and so much more aggressive than I think anybody would ever thought.
Certainly a lot of attention, but help me understand how much has really changed. I've heard you talk about government spending. Doge has gotten a lot of attention. Elon Musk has a lot of attention. Analysts have said the actual savings are not that great. It might end up costing the government something.
Well, first off, I do think in Doge, because remember, you have these verticals like in the third, to connect to the Third World War, sealing the border and starting mass deportation in the middle. Yeah. The existential threat is the government spending and how we finance it, etc. The other part is taking on the administration. I think, and I've had tremendous disagreements with trauma-inducing force like Doe to kind of rattle the administrative state and let folks know, hey, this is going to be very serious, that there's actually going to be a search for waste, fraud, and abuse, but in addition, programmatically, we're going to come back and take apart the administrative state brick by brick. In that regard, it's kind of shock troops. I think they really serve their purpose. Now, to the degree that they find actual $1 trillion, which I was always skeptical about, in waste and fraud, I was highly suspect of, but there will be something. I've actually called for an audit of that. Let's make sure we know specifically what they actually found, and let's get that codified, right? So we don't then maybe we have to cut less program. Number two, there also has to be a certification that no data or data sets of American citizens have gone anywhere except to the Trump administration and or the U.S. government.
You have doubts?
Trust, but verify. Trust, but verify.
Meaning you don't assume that something has gone wrong, but you don't know if something has gone wrong.
Number one, I don't... When you talk about waste and fraud, and remember it was this show that kept harping on, he's got to cross the Potomac and go to the Pentagon. And look, I don't go after the Pentagon because I'm a dove. I'm a hawk, naval officer for many years. After sea duty, served in the Pentagon. Daughter went to... balanced defense spending to what the national security needs of the country are, and our allies. But I think President Trump's laid out. First off, the model we have is not sustainable. The model is essentially the global capital markets or a casino. It's not about long-term investing. A couple of companies in the tech business are at the top, and that drives the metrics. Our beloved military has essentially become rent-a-cops for the casino. That's not appropriate. It's one of the reasons we've had problems with recruiting in the past. A lot of people just don't understand the task and purpose of the military. We're trying to